The Xanthari flagship Eternal Doctrine limped through Earth's orbital defenses like a wounded animal seeking shelter. Once it had been the pride of 7 sectors, a kilometer-long monument to military precision with crystalline armor that reflected starlight like captured diamonds. Now half its hull was blackened slag, atmosphere venting from 17 breaches, and its shields flickered like a dying heartbeat. Commander Thex Vorian stood on the bridge, his 4-fingered hands gripping the command rail so tightly the metal creaked. His silver skin had dulled to ash gray from stress, and the bioluminescent patterns along his neck, marks of his military rank, pulsed erratically. Around him, junior officers worked in silence, their usual proud bearing replaced by something he'd never seen in Xanthari faces. Fear. Status of the remaining fleet, Thex asked, though he already knew the answer would hurt. 17 ships still operational, Commander, replied his tactical officer, voice barely above a whisper. Down from 243, 17. The number sat in Thex's chest like a stone. The Xanthari Expeditionary Force had been the largest military deployment in their civilization's history, and the consuming thought had reduced it to 17 ships in 4 months. The humans are responding to our hail, communications announced. Audio only. Thex straightened his uniform, an automatic gesture of pride that felt hollow now. Open channel. The voice that came through was distinctly human, rough-edged, casual, with an undertone of amusement that made Thex's skin prickle. This is Captain Marcus Webb of Earth Defense Station Valkyrie. We received your, let's call it a request. That's diplomatic, right? Captain Webb, Thex began, forcing his voice to remain steady. I am Commander Thex Vorian of the Xanthari Union. We seek immediate military assistance against the consuming thought. Yeah, we've been watching. Webb's tone shifted, losing its humor. We've been watching you lose for 16 weeks. Impressive dedication to getting slaughtered, by the way. Most species give up around week 8. Heat flushed through Thex's body. Anger, shame, desperation mixing into something poisonous. Captain, our worlds are being consumed. Billions of lives are at stake. If you have any what? Compassion? Obligation? Webb laughed, but it wasn't a kind sound. Commander, let me refresh your memory. 3 years ago, your High Council sent us a very official document. It called Earth a quarantine world, and humanity evolutionary mistakes too violent to join civilized space. Your exact words, I believe, were barely sentient warmongers. Thex closed his eyes. He remembered that document. He'd agreed with it. Now you show up, ships on fire, asking these warmongers for help. Webb paused. That's what you military types call irony, right? We were wrong. The words tasted like acid. Behind Thex, he heard sharp intakes of breath from his crew. Xanthari commanders did not admit mistakes. We were arrogant and we were wrong. But this enemy, it doesn't negotiate, doesn't stop, doesn't show mercy. It learns from every battle, adapts to every tactic. It has consumed 47 civilizations. We are the 48th. Silence stretched across the channel. Thex could hear his own heartbeat, too fast, too loud. How many ships do you have left? Webb finally asked. 17 combat-capable vessels. And how many did you start with? 243, another pause. Jesus, okay, Commander. We'll help you, but under our conditions. Relief flooded through Thex, so intense his legs nearly buckled. Whatever you require, you don't lead. We do. Webb's voice turned to iron. Every tactical decision goes through human command. Every strategy, every deployment, every single shot fired happens because a human officer authorized it. Your people follow our orders without question, without delay, without your fancy military councils debating the honor of it all. You wanted warmongers? Congratulations. You're about to learn what that actually means. Thex looked around his bridge at the exhausted, frightened faces of his crew. He thought of the 40 billion Xanthari on the homeworld, waiting to see if their military could save them. He thought of his own rigid training, his pride, his certainty that Xanthari doctrine was superior to all others. Agreed, he said quietly. Good. Dock at Bay 7. We'll send Colonel Okonkwo to brief you. Webb's tone softened slightly. And Commander, we're going to win this, but you're not going to like how we do it. The channel closed. Thex stood motionless, staring at the view screen where Earth rotated slowly, blue and green and white, deceptively peaceful. A death world, they'd called it. A planet so hostile that its dominant species had evolved to fight everything, including each other, for millions of years. He'd read the classified reports once, dismissed them as exaggeration. Humans had survived ice ages, supervolcano eruptions, and had nearly rendered themselves extinct multiple times through warfare. They'd fought with sticks, then bronze, then steel, then atomic fire. They'd written poetry about war, made it into art, studied it like science. And now the Xanthari needed monsters to fight a monster. "Take us in," Thex ordered, "and prepare the crew for adaptation." As the Eternal Doctrine began its approach to the human station, Thex noticed something that made his blood run cold. The station wasn't the gleaming diplomatic outpost he'd expected. It was a fortress, angular, brutal, covered in weapons that looked less like precision instruments and more like instruments of extinction. Humanity had been preparing for war. Perhaps they'd never stopped. Lieutenant Dax Morvan had never felt so utterly inadequate in his entire military career. He stood in the human training facility, a converted cargo bay that smelled of metal and something acrid he couldn't identify, watching Sergeant Vincent Torres demonstrate what he called tactical flexibility. "Watch closely," Torres said, his dark eyes gleaming with barely contained energy. The human was shorter than Dax by half a meter, but carried himself like a coiled spring. Scars crisscrossed his forearms and his left ear was partially missing. "You see that door?" Dax nodded, following the sergeant's gesture to the reinforced entrance at the far end of the bay. Beside him, 3 other Xanthari officers stood at rigid attention, their silver skin gleaming under the harsh lights. "Standard Xanthari assault protocol," Torres continued, pacing back and forth. "You'd stack up, breach, flood the room with maximum force, overwhelm through superior firepower and coordination. Textbook, efficient, predictable." He spat the last word like a curse. "The consuming thought has seen that play 47 times. It knows exactly how to counter it." "Then what do you propose?" Dax asked, struggling to keep the irritation from his voice. They'd been training for 6 days, and every session followed the same pattern. Humans mocking Xanthari doctrine, demonstrating seemingly random tactics, then refusing to explain the underlying logic. Torres grinned, and Dax realized why the other humans called him Wraith. When he smiled, he looked slightly unhinged. "We don't go through the door." Before Dax could respond, Torres pulled a small device from his belt and pressed a button. An explosion rocked the far wall, not the door but the wall 3 meters to its left. Dust and debris filled the air. Through the smoke, Torres sprinted forward, not toward the new hole but toward a ventilation shaft Dax hadn't even noticed. "Second squad through the breach," Torres shouted into his comm. "Third squad, maintain position at the door. Make noise, make them think you're coming through." Dax watched in confusion as human soldiers executed the maneuver. Half created a distraction at the door, shouting, firing blank rounds, moving with exaggerated obviousness. The other half flowed through the wall breach and the ventilation shaft like water finding cracks in stone. "Target eliminated," Torres announced 15 seconds later, emerging from the ventilation shaft covered in dust. "0 casualties, but—" "That makes no sense," Dax protested. "You wasted explosives on a non-tactical entry point. You split your forces. You made unnecessary noise that could alert." "Exactly." Torres walked up to Dax, close enough that the Xanthari could smell the human's sweat. It was an aggressive posture, one that would trigger a challenge duel in Xanthari culture. "We did 5 things that make no tactical sense. Which one does your enemy predict? Which one does it counter?" Dax opened his mouth, then closed it. The logic was illogical. All of them? Can't counter all of them simultaneously. Not perfectly. Torres tapped Dax's chest with one finger. "Your people fight like a symphony. Everyone playing the same notes, perfect harmony, beautiful coordination. The hive mind loves symphonies. It's basically one big symphony itself. And humans? We fight like a bar fight. Chaotic, unpredictable, dirty. We'll throw a chair, then negotiate, then bite your ear off while shaking your hand. We're jazz, not classical." Torres stepped back, his expression turning serious. The consuming thought conquered 47 civilizations because they all fought logically. Perfect formations, optimal strategies, predictable responses. You're trying to outthink something with 1,000 linked minds. You can't, so we abandon logic? Another Xanthari officer asked, horror in her voice. "We fight like animals?" "No," said a new voice. Dr. Helena Frost emerged from an observation room, her gray hair pulled back severely, her pale eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. She carried a data tablet glowing with complex equations. You fight like humans. There's a difference. Dax had met Dr. Frost once before, a xenobiologist who'd spent the last 3 days dissecting captured consuming thought biomass. She spoke rarely, but when she did, even Torres listened. The hive mind operates on pattern recognition, Frost explained, pulling up a holographic display. It observes, analyzes, adapts. Every battle makes it smarter. When your fleets engaged it, Lieutenant Morvan, what happened? Dax's throat tightened. First engagement, we achieved 34% casualties against the enemy. Second engagement, 18%. Third engagement, 4%. By the fifth engagement, he trailed off. By the fifth engagement, it was slaughtering you. Frost's tone wasn't cruel, just factual, because it learned your patterns. Xanthari military doctrine is elegant, efficient, and consistent. Those are virtues in peacetime. Against this enemy, they're fatal. She manipulated the hologram showing neural pathway mappings of the consuming thought. The hive mind has what we call optimization bias. It seeks the most efficient solution to every problem. When it encounters a pattern, it develops a counter-pattern. When it encounters logic, it applies superior logic. And when it encounters chaos? Dax asked quietly. Frost smiled, and it wasn't a comforting expression. It tries to find the pattern in the chaos. It calculates probabilities, runs predictive models, searches for the underlying algorithm. But human warfare doesn't have an underlying algorithm. We evolved fighting each other. Thousands of cultures, each with different tactics, forced to constantly innovate or die. We learned to be unpredictable because predictability meant extinction. Torres pulled up another display. Historical human battles. Dax saw names flash by. Thermopylae, Cannae, Stalingrad, Tate Offensive, Desert Storm. Every battle we've ever fought taught us something new. We learned deception from each other. Psychological warfare, guerrilla tactics. We learned to make the enemy think we're here when we're there, think we're weak when we're strong, think we've retreated when we're flanking. The consuming thought has never faced an opponent that lies, Frost added. It's fought civilizations that valued honor, truth, logical discourse. You Xanthari, broadcast your intentions, announce your strategies, fight with dignity. She leaned forward. We don't. Dax felt something cold settle in his stomach. You're asking us to become dishonorable. We're asking you to survive, Torres said flatly. Honor's great. Write poems about it after we win. Right now, I need you to learn how to fake a retreat. Fake a communications failure. Fake a reactor breach. Anything that makes the enemy commit to the wrong response. Over the next hours, the training intensified. Torres had them practice starting advances, then aborting midway for no apparent reason. Practice announcing targets, then striking completely different locations. Practice coordinating carefully, then deliberately breaking formation at random intervals. It was maddening. Every Xanthari instinct screamed against it. Their military culture had been built over 10,000 years on principles of precision, honor, and perfect execution. What Torres taught felt like sacrilege. During a break, Dax found himself standing beside Commander Thex Vorian, who'd been observing from the upper gallery. This is madness, Commander, Dax said quietly. They're teaching us to fight like them, Thex finished. His voice was hollow. I watched the tactical briefings from their historical archives. Do you know what humans call their greatest military victories? Dax shook his head. Miracles, impossible odds, last stands. Thex turned to face his lieutenant. They have a saying, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. So they learned to make plans that are already broken, tactics that are already chaotic, strategies that work because they shouldn't. But the cost will be less than extinction. Thex's bioluminescent patterns pulsed with determination. The consuming thought destroyed our fleets because we fought perfectly. Perhaps we need to learn how to fight imperfectly. That evening, Dax participated in a full combat simulation. His squad was assigned to capture a defended position alongside a human fire team. The Xanthari began their standard approach, measured advance, covering fire, coordinated suppression. Torres and his humans did something completely different. They charged forward screaming, threw smoke grenades that obscured their own vision, split up randomly. Then 3 of them doubled back and attacked from behind while making sounds like local wildlife. It was chaos. It was stupid. It was tactically unsound. It worked perfectly. The simulation enemy, programmed with consuming thought behavioral patterns, had focused all its defenses on the obvious Zenthari approach. When the humans struck from an impossible angle using illogical tactics, the simulated hive mind froze for 2.3 seconds trying to recalculate. In combat, 2.3 seconds was an eternity. That, Torres said afterward, clapping Dax on the shoulder, is how we're going to kill this thing. Not by being better than it, by being weirder than it can handle. Dax looked at his commander, then at the humans around him, scarred, laughing, already planning their next incomprehensible tactic. He thought of his homeworld, of the billions depending on them. And for the first time since the war began, he felt something other than despair. He felt dangerous. The consuming thought had never experienced confusion before. Across its 1,000 interconnected nodes, spanning 17 star systems, the collective consciousness that had devoured 47 civilizations processed an impossible contradiction. The humans were attacking Zenthar Prime. All sensors confirmed it. Except they weren't. Except they were. Except the patterns made no sense. Warmind Cluster 7, the tactical nexus responsible for the Zenthar system, analyzed the incoming data streams with increasing computational strain. 3 human battle groups approached from Vector 447, engines burning hot. Communications chatter consistent with full assault formation. Logical response. Redirect 60% of defensive forces to intercept. But simultaneously, distress signals erupted from the outer mining colonies. Human strike teams, ground assault confirmed. Logical response dispatch rapid response units, but orbital sensors detected human ships entering atmosphere at the capital city. Logical response activate planetary defense grid, but deep space monitoring reported a human dreadnought, the Unbroken, charging directly at the primary hive nexus. Suicide run, logical response concentrate fire, eliminate the threat. Warmind Cluster 7 divided its attention, allocated resources according to optimal threat assessment, and executed 4 simultaneous defensive operations with perfect coordination. Then everything changed. The 3 battle groups approaching Vector 447 suddenly broke formation, scattered in random directions, and went silent. The mining colony attacks turned out to be false signals, human electronic warfare broadcasting fake biosignatures. The atmospheric entry wasn't an invasion force but empty drop pods filled with scrap metal. And the Unbroken, charging toward certain death, abruptly reversed course, fired a single missile at a seemingly random moon, and jumped away. Warmind Cluster 7 recalculated. New data suggested nothing. The pattern was absent. The logic was broken. For the first time in its existence, the consuming thought experienced something that its creators, long since consumed, would have called doubt. On the bridge of the Unbroken, Captain Marcus Webb watched his tactical display with grim satisfaction. Fight complete. Torres, what's your status? 2 clicks from primary nexus, Captain, came the sergeant's voice, crackling with static. Exactly where they're not looking. Webb glanced at Commander Thex Vorian, who stood rigidly beside the captain's chair. The Zenthari's bioluminescent patterns pulsed with barely controlled anxiety. This is insane, Thex muttered. We're throwing away tactical advantages, wasting resources on false attacks. We're teaching it to chase ghosts, Webb interrupted. Watch. The main display showed enemy forces repositioning, massive biomechanical constructs flowing toward where the human threats had been, not where they were. Perfect reallocation of defensive assets based on obsolete information. Now, Webb said quietly into his comm, all units execute Protocol Bedlam. Across the Zenthar system, chaos erupted. Human ships that had retreated suddenly reversed, attacking the positions they'd just abandoned. Units that had gone silent roared back to life in completely different locations. The random missile that had struck an empty moon detonated, and the moon fractured, sending debris cascading through orbital lanes that the consuming thought had just filled with reinforcements. Phase 2, Webb announced. Zenthari forces, you're up. Execute your assault by the book. Thex straightened, a flicker of hope crossing his features. All Zenthari ships, this is Commander Vorian. Standard assault formation. Target the Western Hive Cluster. Precision strike. full coordination. The 17 remaining Xanthari vessels moved with their characteristic elegance, perfect spacing, synchronized fire patterns, textbook execution. They struck with devastating accuracy at the exact moment the consuming thought was still trying to predict where the humans would appear next. Warmind Cluster 7 registered the Xanthari attack 0.4 seconds late. In those 0.4 of a second, 3 hive nodes were destroyed. The collective consciousness reeled. The illogical chaos had obscured the logical threat. On the ground, Lieutenant Dax Morvan was learning that human warfare was even more disturbing up close. His mixed squad, 5 Xanthari, 6 humans, moved through the biomechanical corridors of Hive Structure 12. The walls pulsed with organic circuitry, and the air tasted of copper and ozone. Somewhere ahead, the primary processing node coordinated planetary consumption operations. "Contact 50 meters," whispered Private Jessica Reeves, the squad's point. She was barely 20 Earth years old, with nervous hands and eyes that had seen too much. 6 drones, heavy configuration. Standard protocol: take cover, establish firing positions, coordinate suppression fire. Dax opened his mouth to give the order. Sergeant Torres beat him to it. "Reeves, do the thing." "The thing, Sarge?" "Yeah, the weird thing you did on Proxima Station." Reeves grinned, that unsettling human expression that showed too many teeth. She pulled out a small speaker, set it on the ground, and activated it. The sound that emerged was horrifying, a recording of human children singing. But the recording was corrupted, distorted, playing backward and forward simultaneously. The approaching drones stopped. Just stopped. Their sensors tried to process the audio signature, categorize the threat level, determine appropriate response. "Now, Dax," Torres whispered. Dax and his Xanthari teammates fired, their plasma rifles finding targets that were too busy analyzing meaningless noise to defend themselves. All 6 drones collapsed in sparking heaps. "What was that?" Dax demanded, staring at the speaker. "Confusion," Torres said simply. "The hive mind tries to categorize everything. Give it something it can't categorize and it freezes up. Children's songs played backward. Its database has nothing, so it stops to figure it out." They moved deeper into the structure. At each junction, the humans employed new, incomprehensible tactics. Torres would suddenly announce they were retreating, get halfway back, then immediately advance again. Reeves would fire 3 shots, reload, fire 2 shots, reload, fire 7 shots. No pattern, no rhythm. Another human, Corporal Jackson, kept up a constant stream of commentary on human sports, discussing something called baseball in explicit detail while they fought. "Why are you talking?" Dax hissed during a firefight. "Because it hates not understanding," Jackson replied, ducking behind cover. "It's listening to every word, trying to determine if it's code, if it's tactical communication, if it's relevant. It's wasting processing power on the infield fly rule." The Xanthari and Dax's squad began to adapt. When he ordered them to hold a position, one of them, Corporal Sella, suddenly abandoned it, then returned, then left again. Completely undisciplined, completely effective. The enemy defensive algorithm kept recalculating her position, spreading its fire across 3 locations when she was only ever in one. They reached the central processing node, a massive chamber where biomechanical architecture merged into something almost beautiful, pulsing with captured consciousness from a dozen consumed species. Warmind Cluster 7's primary avatar manifested, a humanoid shape made of writhing metal and preserved neural tissue. When it spoke, the voice echoed with stolen memories. "Humans, inefficient, illogical. Why do you persist in patterns that contradict optimal survival?" Torres laughed, and it was the sound of someone who'd already made peace with death. "Because we don't have optimal survival. We have spite. Incomprehensible." "Yeah," Torres said, pulling out a detonator. "We know." The charges they'd been planting throughout their entire assault, sometimes when retreating, sometimes when advancing, sometimes apparently randomly, activated simultaneously. The chamber shuddered. Warmind Cluster 7 finally understood. The humans hadn't been fighting to reach this location. They'd been fighting to make it think they were fighting to reach this location. The real attack was everywhere else. The seemingly random missile strikes, the false retreats, the nonsensical movements. Each one had delivered something: a virus, an explosive, A cascading system failure. The consuming thought had optimized its defense against an assault that was never coming while ignoring the 1,000 tiny cuts that were killing it. You fight without purpose, the avatar stammered, its form destabilizing. No, Dax heard himself say, surprising everyone, including himself. We fight without your purpose, and that's what makes us unpredictable. The chamber collapsed. 18 hours later, Commander Thex Vorian stood on the bridge of the Eternal Doctrine, watching the last hive structure burn in Zenthar Prime's atmosphere. Around him, exhausted officers leaned against their stations. They'd won. Impossibly, chaotically, they'd won. Captain Webb's face appeared on the comm screen, looking as tired as Thex felt. Congratulations, Commander. Your planet is secure. Thanks to you, Thex replied. Thanks to your methods, Webb shrugged. Our methods are just survival instincts with fancy names. You did the hard part, you adapted. Most species can't, because they value logic too highly, because they value being right too highly. Webb's expression turned serious. The consuming thought was right about optimal tactics, right about efficient resource allocation, right about everything. And it lost because being right doesn't matter when the other guy's willing to be wrong in creative ways. Thex looked at his crew, at Lieutenant Dax Morvan, who'd stopped polishing his uniform 3 days ago and now looked half feral, at his tactical officer, who'd learned to give contradictory orders, at his entire command structure which had embraced beautiful, terrible chaos. What happens to us now? Thex asked quietly. We're not Zenthari anymore. Not the way we were. Webb smiled, but it was gentle, almost sad. Welcome to humanity's oldest lesson, Commander. Survival changes you. War changes you. You don't get to stay the same person and also stay alive. The question is whether the change was worth it. Thex looked at his homeworld, intact, alive, its billion lights still burning in the darkness. Yeah, he said finally. It was worth it. Good. Webb began to disconnect, then paused. Oh, and Commander? We're sending you our complete tactical database. Every human war, every strategy, every dirty trick we've ever pulled. You're going to need it. Why? Because the consuming thought isn't dead. We killed one cluster, one node. The main consciousness is still out there in the galactic core learning from this defeat. Webb's eyes were hard. It's going to adapt to chaos now, which means we need to adapt to something even weirder than chaos. You in? Thex felt something stir in his chest. Not the pride of a Zenthari commander, but something rawer, more dangerous. The feeling of a survivor ready to do whatever it takes. We're in, he said. After Webb disconnected, Lieutenant Dax approached. Commander, the crew is asking about restoration protocols. When do we return to standard Zenthari operations? Thex thought about perfect formations, elegant strategies, and the 47 civilizations that had died fighting logically. He thought about Sergeant Torres throwing chairs in a bar fight. He thought about humanity's long, bloody, beautiful history of winning when they should have lost. We don't, Thex said quietly. From now on, we fight like the galaxy taught us to. We fight like humans. Outside the viewport, Earth hung in the distance, that impossible blue marble where evolution had created something unique. Not the strongest species, not the smartest, not the fastest. Just the most stubborn, most creative, most absolutely unwilling to die according to someone else's rules. The Zenthari had begged for aid and received something far more dangerous. They'd received humanity's greatest weapon, the refusal to fight fair. And in the depths of space, the consuming thought felt something new ripple through its vast consciousness. Something it would spend the next decade trying to categorize, trying to understand, trying to predict: fear.